Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar on mastering appraisal standards, language, boundaries, and market trends. Keeping everyone up to date on all the latest and greatest when it comes to the agencies and their guidelines. My name is Steve Sussman. I serve as Chief Business Development Officer here at NAN, overseeing our relationships with the lenders and brokers across the industry. I'm not an appraiser myself, but I am here to help a great appraiser, Bill Waltenbaugh, our chief appraiser. I'll be moderating today's discussion, and Bill will be presenting. Bill is a certified residential appraiser with more than 30 years of property valuation experience. I think it's fair to say he's pretty much seen it all in this business. These days, Bill is really passionately focused on helping to evolve, modernize the valuation industry in a way that can be mutually beneficial to appraisers, lenders, and borrowers, and leveraging technology to support ever improving accuracy, efficiency, and of course, impartiality for all of us. I'm going to hand it over to Bill in just a minute. I did want to mention, though, we welcome questions and comments and general interactions throughout the presentation. This is a business where we need to talk to one another. And this webinar is a little unique in that we have invited both our lender partners and our appraiser partners to the same webinar with a chance to hear each other's perspectives and to talk through things too. As an AMC, we really try hard to understand that balance that comes with our job as we sit between the lender and the appraiser. And we want to always make sure that we afford independence to the appraisers as required as well. So hearing your candid feedback on these topics, always valuable. Please feel free to chime in with anything in the chat along the way. In order to keep things running smoothly, I do ask that you just go ahead and type those in that chat box rather than raising your hand or speaking during the webinar. I'll be watching that chat, make sure to relay those questions over to Bill, and appreciate everyone being here. So let's learn something. Let's have some fun. Bill, I'm going to turn it over to you. And again, thank you everybody for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Steve. And thank you, everybody, for taking a few minutes out of your day to join us here and talk about some of these new important changes that are occurring and will be implemented soon. We've got a year or two of a whole bunch of changes coming. This is really kind of the tip of the iceberg. So I'd love for everybody, probably at the end or anytime during the process here or the webinar, if you have a topic that you think is important or you'd like for us to address as a group, I'd love for you to throw that in there. We love doing these sessions, having an opportunity to speak directly to our appraisers and to our clients as well. Our appraisers' clients. Before we get started here, if you use the chat feature, we're going to do a few poll questions here. There's no right or wrong answers, right? I guess, you either are a lender or an appraiser or other. So I guess that's right or wrong. But it's just kind of a way for us to get a little bit of information about you. So we'll pop these up every once in a while. But to answer the poll questions, just go ahead and type your answer in the chat feature. So let's get started.
Bill, I can tell you for that first question, it looks like a real great mix. I'd say we lean a little bit more on the appraiser side, but lots of lenders here joining us too, and a few others who I'm really curious what that other means, but we got a few others here in the building too.
There you go. All right. So let's go over the agenda. This is what we'll be covering. It's a lot to cover. Really hope we can get through this in the time allowed. When we get towards the end, we'll see if everybody's okay hanging out for a while. Certainly good with going a little longer, as long as you all are open to that as well. So here's what we're going to go over. We're going to look at avoiding prohibited language in appraisals. We're going to look at defining neighborhoods and market areas, and then finish up with mastering market trend analysis and the market time adjustments that are required on an appraisal report. And then we'll end up with a question and answer session. So the Fannie Mae Selling Guide makes it really clear that prohibited language has no place in an appraisal report, but What exactly is prohibited language? Interesting, the guide doesn't give us a formal standalone definition of the term. Instead, it provides policies and guidelines that define the concept. So, what does that look like in practice? Let's look at these concepts to better understand what Fannie Mae expects of appraisers and the language that's in appraisal reports. Fannie Mae provides guidance on prohibited language through its unacceptable appraisal practices policy. In the selling guide, you can find that at B4 1.1 04. There's a whole list of things there, but some of the items that they touch on is the language. This is where the expectations for language are clearly laid out. First, the language must be objective. We're here to present facts, not opinions. And second, it must be based on market data. Our conclusions should always be supported by evidence that we gather. And then lastly, it needs to be free from references or implications related to protective classes or subjective opinions. So these principles set the foundation for what Fannie Mae considers acceptable language in our reports. So why is this important? Well, we got three new messages in Collateral Underwriter. Familiar with Collateral Underwriter? That's the automated system that Fannie Mae uses to check your appraisal reports. And what you're looking at here are the messages that are identified in Collateral Underwriter that's reported in the SSRs. This is what we get to see as an as an AMC if we submit a report to the UCDP on the lender client's behalf. So when the report goes in and it runs through, if any of these issues arise, these are the message that we'll see in the SSR. The only thing that, in addition to what you're seeing right here, is in between those carets, it'll have the phrase and the location of where they find the issue within the appraisal report. What our lender clients have in CU is way more robust and includes a lot more information. Maybe not so much with the language one here, but with other things, comparable sales and time adjustments when we get to that. So let's break this
Bill,
down. Yeah.
We got some really great chat happening, and I just want to put a couple of things out there for you to weigh in on here. As you could imagine, this is a sensitive subject, especially I think for our appraiser partners who 99.99% have great intentions and are trying to come up with a fair and accurate measure of value and not in any way make judgment about the people who own the home or the community. But it can sometimes feel that way, that the appraisers are being looked at as though they are intentionally making statements that could be interpreted in a way that would be negative toward a certain group. I think we all know in this room here that's not the way that the appraisers typically operate, but there's some concerns, right? So new words being added like family oriented and retirement. The understanding that appraisals are subjective because it's a subjective opinion of value. So how do we remove all subjective language? I have questions about certain words that are being included on these banned word lists, so to speak, and really whether they are necessary or appropriate to be removed. I know you don't make these rules, and it's difficult to weigh in on each one, but would love to kind of get your take on when we talk about removing subjective language. Tell us a little bit about how you remove subjective language from a report, but still are able to give a subjective opinion of value.
Yeah, and of course, the opinion of value also needs to be supported, right, with the data that you collect, which should be reflective of the facts, your analysis, and then finally to your opinion, right, regarding the value that is supported there. One of the things I always talk about is how an appraiser is kind of like a trial attorney. You need to gather information, you need to present the information, right? And then you need to provide your closing argument. So you're gathering facts, you're presenting the facts, and then you're providing your opinion based on those facts. When we go through this, and don't get me wrong, again, I've been an appraiser for 35 years, and there are certainly things that I've put in my reports that today would not find a place there, and totally understanding that things always change, right? Doesn't matter what it is. The one thing that's constant is change. And so, these are the new rules that we're operating under. As we go through these messages and try to break this down, hopefully I'll help you kind of get in the mindset about what to use, what not to use, maybe how to rephrase your commentary in your report, so that we don't get any of the messages. The good thing is, if NAN submits to UCDP on the client's behalf, we do take a look at these. And, if we see any, we'll probably let you know, right? We're going to say, hey, you got something in your report that's been flagged. Let's find out another way to state that, right, so that we don't have any issues. And ultimately, I think it's going to be better for everybody in the long run, right? Because you certainly don't want to have anything in your report that could potentially be seen as inappropriate or shouldn't belong there. So first, this message 801, it's the most egregious. It's explicit references to protected classes. I don't think there's anything here that anybody would argue about. It carries the highest compliance risk, and that is because if not corrected, it's probably going to end up at an enforcement agency through mandatory reporting. So again, it's explicit references to protected classes. The next one, 802, focuses on subjective language that lacks measurable or factual support. So it's a reminder to ensure that all conclusions are grounded in data and not personal judgment or opinion. And we're going to go over some of those examples here in just a second. And then finally, 803 targets indirect or inferred demographic references. So it's kind of the opposite of the 8001 up there, where it's very explicit. This one is more inferred. So the way you say it doesn't specifically identify a demographic, but could be interpreted as something. And again, we always have to, think about how our words could be interpreted. It could be completely wrong, right? But if it can be interpreted that way, we need to do everything we can to make sure that it's not interpreted incorrectly. So,
Bill, I'm going to just jump in one more time real quickly because
Yeah.
the chat's coming in hot for you here. And,
Okay.
Ed's posing some tough questions, and I want to put them out there for discussion. And I think this first one's very reasonable, right? Why won't the GSEs make a complete list of words that are not allowable, make it public and provide it to the appraisers and keep it simple? Ed's concerned that the GSEs are looking to give the appraisers a hard time. I'm not sure I would personally go that far, but I think the first part of that question is really relevant as to, wouldn't it make sense to give the appraisers a really clear guide so that they know what's okay and what's not?
Yeah, and Steve, I'm not behind the scenes, not behind the curtain of Fannie Mae, so I can't tell you exactly how these messages are sourced and fire, right? It could be that it may not be a specific word list. With a lot of, I'm sure everybody's heard about artificial intelligence. And that would be a way for them to be able to read what's actually being said and determine whether or not it's an issue or not. It's all very new, and so I don't have enough feedback and experience with it to even come up with a thought on how it's being sourced. But that's definitely a very high probability. Um, so, I think that if it was easy as just a list, then yeah, maybe we could provide that list. This first one, 8,001. There's there's really no question here. I don't think anybody needs a list. This message identifies language in appraisal reports that directly reference a protected class. We're talking as about very specific items, like the example there that saying something's predominantly Hispanic or in a Jewish neighborhood. I think we all know and understand, and I don't even think we need to have a webinar to understand that those are things that just can't be in an appraisal report. So that takes us to the next one. This message flags subjective or opinion-based terms that lack measurable market evidence or are inherently vague. So, for example, phrases like pride of ownership, good neighborhood, or desirable location. Each and every one of us could have a different definition for those terms. What may be pride of ownership for one person can be completely different for someone else. And so, in essence, we're providing information here that doesn't really give any additional context to unless someone knows specifically what those things mean to you as the writer, right? So the best thing is just to avoid those altogether. You should really just stick to data whenever you're providing those descriptions. You can, age of homes, the amount of updating that has occurred, or things of that nature. So whenever it's triggered, if we see this, we'll probably ask you to change it. And please understand, it's not NAN or even an individual or reviewer's opinion on whether they think it's good or bad. It's the messages that we're receiving. The same with our lenders, right? So if it goes through and they see this, they're going to be sending that back to us, asking us to then send that to the appraiser. And then this last one, 803 or 8003, this message identifies language that, while not explicitly referring to a protected class, the way you say it could infer demographic or socioeconomic characteristics, terms like blue collar neighborhood or working class area. Again, even it may not even be your intention, but somebody else that may have a different understanding of that term might infer something that you totally didn't even understand. I don't think any of us wants that. So why are they prohibited? Why do we have a lot of concentration on this? Well, first and foremost, they violate fair housing laws and Fannie Mae's selling guide. Language that introduces bias or discrimination or subjective opinions that can't be measured undermines the principles and fairness and equality that are central to our work. In addition, these practices could lead to non-compliant reports as they relate to the uniform standards of professional appraisal practice. So, USPAP emphasizes impartiality, objectivity, and the language that conflicts with these principles could impact the integrity of your report. So, by avoiding these practices, we ensure compliance and uphold professionalism and maintaining the public trust. So I kind of try to break things down into a mantra or something that you can think of to remember whenever you're writing a report. And it should, this is the things that we should really think about to determine whether or not the language is acceptable. And we need to report facts over feelings, focus on objective data and measurable market evidence, no personal opinions or interpretations. Let the market tell the story. Our role is to to analyze and communicate what the market reveals about the property, not to add our own narrative, and describe the property, not the people. That's really the best one there, right? It's the property that we're appraising. It's not the people that are in it or around it or anything else. Really, no need to address that in any way possible. So, keep the focus on the physical characteristic and market influences of the property, and avoid language that could reference or imply the demographics. So we're going to go ahead and ask the next poll question. We can pause here for a second, Steve, if you had any additional items or
I sure do. They are
Okay.
coming in hot right now. And look, I get why. If I were an appraiser, and I think Mike said it really well here just a couple minutes ago. He said lately, the people that manage and regulate the industry have made it feel like appraisers are people of questionable character, only out to help lenders make the deal happen at whatever cost. And I think we at NAN, we purposely try to avoid talking about appraisal bias because that word bias, it implies intentionality. Instead, we try to look at how can we ensure equitable treatment for all borrowers when receiving a valuation of their home, right? And because we want the appraisers to be part of the solution. We don't think the appraisers are the problem. We think the appraisers are the best chance at a solution. So how do you interpret, Bill? Or how would you say to kind of to read the guidance that comes in as an appraiser? Do you get that feeling too of, hey, we're not trusted, we're looked at as we are, undermining the system, doing things improperly, have biases that we are intentionally delivering, or from your position, kind of sitting in between here, do you see it a little bit different way?
Right. And I mean, and look, I know it might be hard, right? But if there's no ill intent, right, and if there is, well, then I guess it's deserved, right? But I'm in your boat, Steve. I think most of us really there's no malice or intent with the words that we're using in our reports. Things are different and things have changed. And so I think it's just really important for us to understand those changes, and soon we'll understand what is acceptable and what isn't, and this will really kind of all be behind us. Don't view it as a personal attack. I do think that these messages in Collateral Underwriter, I mean, I think ultimately, if we step back, take a breath, let's look at it. I think it's ultimately a good thing, right? Because the optics, people talk about optics. You can say one thing and a person's optics can be completely different. And so the fact that these messages are available, and it gives it's giving us an opportunity to step back, take a breath, look at it, and say, you know what? There is a different way for me to say this so that someone doesn't misunderstand or misinterpret my intentions, right? And by doing that, I think it protects you as an appraiser. You don't want people to think something other than what you actually intended. If there is that wiggle room in there, well, then you could say that isn't what you mean, but it's already on paper. So to a certain degree, I think it can be helpful.
Thanks, Bill. And
Yep.
I could share a couple more comments here coming in. And I think Micaiah offered a great example about subjective versus objective, talking about the word walkable, right? For one person, 5 miles might be walkable. For somebody else, it may be a much shorter distance or no distance at all. So instead, how about just call out, here's how far it is to the center of the city, and let people decide for themselves what's walkable. But then, and I'm going to give you another tough one here because I think it's a fair question. Brian. And Brian says, the markets are biased. And the way I interpret this is, hey, if you're out shopping for a home and you know that it is a high crime area versus a low crime area, you'll probably be willing to spend a different amount in an area where there's less crime happening actively, right? So what are the appraisers to do there? Just take that out of the equation, ignore it. And, even if the markets may be biased, it's up to us as an industry to remove that bias as best we can? Or can the appraisers, have that freedom to call anything out that really genuinely could impact value?
Right. So, I mean, and it really don't want to get into specifics. I mean, I don't think there's really any reason why the crime statistics needs to be reported in an appraisal. Again, and we're going to talk about neighborhood and market area later. But I mean, if you're using comparables that are in a similar area and that are impacted by the same influence, what difference does it make, right? It's already incorporated within the analysis itself. So mentioning that really doesn't doesn't provide any lift at all. And again, that may be your own opinion versus what others would think. So.
Thanks, Bill. No, it's a tough question, admittedly. I appreciate the candid feedback on it. I think it's great that we have our lender partners here too, able to get a sense of what the appraisers are experiencing and feeling too. And I'd love to hear from some of the lenders who I'm sure have their own challenges in this area that the appraisers may not be aware of. So keep those comments coming, guys. I'll let Bill keep moving on here, but yeah, the chat is active. I'll try to keep you apprised here, Bill.
All right. So moving on to the next poll question. It's been up there for a while. I'm sure everybody hopefully been answering that. But we're going to talk about the market area and the neighborhood because Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have modified the definitions or clarified the definitions of these two areas. And I was looking at it. I'm like, okay, well, which ones may be more important? Is it the market area? Is it the neighborhood, or both? So go ahead and again, there's no right or wrong answers. Just your thoughts. So let's move on to defining neighborhoods and market areas. Focus on new standardized definitions. Matter of fact, it's I haven't looked it up specifically, but I believe these definitions are very similar to what the Appraisal Institute has them as. I could be wrong in that, just going from memory. But neighborhood is defined as a congruous group of complementary land uses. Essentially, it's an area where the use of land, like residential, commercial, or recreational, work together in harmony. Whereas market area, on the other hand, refers to the geographic region for the subject property. This is where most of the demand for the property comes from and where most of its competition is located. So let's break these definitions down a little more, starting with neighborhood. Again, think of it as a group of houses or buildings near each other that are used in ways that complement one another. Neighborhoods are defined by geographic and physical boundaries, and typically share common characteristics, such as zoning, property types, amenities like parks and schools, shopping centers that serve the community, and market trends specific to pricing and demand and other items. So now it's important to note that neighborhoods are fixed geographic units, right? They remain consistent and don't change from one assignment to another. So now let's dive into the market area concept. And like neighborhoods, the market areas are broader and focused on buyers and competition for a specific property. So it's the region where most potential buyers for the property are likely to come from, where other homes that compete with it are located. So one key distinction to remember is that market areas can change from assignment to assignment because they're assignment specific. They're determined by the unique characteristics of the subject property and the dynamics of the local market at the time of the appraisal. So let's dig into that a little more. Why are these concepts important, and why are their definitions? Why have they taken the time to to clarify these definitions and make it a focus? Well, they're the key elements in comparable selection. And as we all know, comparable selection is a critical step in the appraisal process. So let's review the definition of comparable sale. And according to the Fannie Mae Selling Guide, V4-1.3-08, it states that comparable sales should be competitive and, quote, appeal to the same market participants who would also consider purchasing the subject property. So in simple terms, and I've probably written this a million times in my appraisal career, in my reports, is that a comparable property is one the typical buyer of the subject property would also consider as a reasonable alternative when they're in the market or shopping for a home, right? That's essentially it. That's a comparable property, one the typical buyer of the subject would also consider when in a market for a home. So how does the neighbor influence the selection of comparable sales? Well, it's our starting point, right? It reflects the immediate location, and it has the similar influences: zoning, proximity to amenities, local market trends, crime statistics, I guess. However, it's important to remember that the neighborhood boundaries are fixed, may not fully capture the property's competitive landscape. So, for example, buyer preferences or unique property characteristics might extend beyond the neighborhood, requiring us to look at a broader market area to find truly comparable sales. So this is why it is critical to balance the neighborhood influence with market dynamics to ensure our analysis reflects what the most relevant or potential, what is what most relevant to potential buyers. How does market area influence comparable sales? Well, the market area defines a geographic region where most buyers and competing properties exist. And through different articles I've written and educational things in the past, there are several examples I've used. One was a manufactured home that's out in the country. I mean, is it okay to use a manufactured home that's maybe completely on the other side of town? Quite possibly, right? If the majority of people work, that's the area where most of them go. If they're looking for a manufactured home on some acreage, would one side really make much difference than the other? So while the neighborhood provides valuable context and it's a critical starting point, the market area is essential for ensuring that the comparables we select or truly reflect the competitive alternatives available to the same pool of buyers. And by considering the market area, we can capture a broader, more accurate picture of the competitive landscape and align our analysis with buyer behavior and market trends. So we should always start with the neighborhood. Whenever possible, use comparable sales from the same neighborhood. These typically reflect similar locational characteristics and influences, making them highly relevant. However, you may need to expand the market area if neighborhood sales are limited or unsuitable, for example, due to unique property features or low sales activities, if appropriate, to look at comparable sales from the broader market area. Finally, always provide justification. Clearly explain why sales outside the neighborhood were selected. It says very specifically in Fannie Mae's selling guide, you don't just expand your neighborhood, right? The neighborhood is fixed. It is what it is. But comparable sales may be located out of that neighborhood in the market area. So demonstrate how these comparables appeal to the same pool of buyers as the subject property, and be sure to address any differences to ensure transparency and support your analysis. So here's a quick example for us, and I've seen this numerous times throughout my career. And let's take this unique hillside ocean view property. It's up on the hill. It overlooks the ocean, and it's within a community that's much smaller It gives these awesome views. It's custom built, has these high-end materials and finishes, and the lot is also, larger than the other properties in the neighborhood. In that neighborhood, we got primarily mid-range homes without ocean views, and there are limited recent sales of similar view properties. In other words, right within the neighborhood, there's very little competition with the subject. Anybody looking to buy the subject property would not be considering the other properties as a reasonable alternative. So, what do we do here? Well, I say we need to expand into the market area selection and broaden our search to include nearby coastal towns or hillside communities that may also have homes with similar ocean view characteristics. And the goal is to focus on areas where buyers are seeking these high-end ocean view properties, and ones that they would realistically consider whenever they're in the market for a property like that. Okay, so probably a lot of us have done this before, and I'm not going to lie. I've seen you put a lot of time and effort into the commentary to explain why it is that you're doing what you're doing. But it still doesn't mean that you don't get pushback or a lot of questions about your analysis. I've written up here, some sample commentary that you can put in your report. I think it's important to address both concepts within your commentary. Make sure to mention the neighborhood and make sure to mention the market area in your commentary. And this gives the reader a better understanding how you're meeting the expectations of the selling guide. So let's take a look at this. The subject property's unique hillside ocean view and custom construction make it unlike other homes in the immediate neighborhood, primarily consisting of standard mid-range homes without views. The market area was expanded to include coastal hillside communities where buyers seeking high-end ocean view homes are likely to purchase. They selected comparables. The selected comparables share key features with the subject properties, such as unobstructed ocean views, custom construction, similar lot sizes, making them competitive in the same buyer pool. Location adjustments were applied to account for differences in proximity to the beach and variations in the local market demand between the subject neighborhood and the expanded market area. Again, we're mentioning the two concepts within our commentary, and we're providing explanation, right, as to what we're doing and why we're doing it, and also providing additional support that these things are accounted for. So here's our general mantra, right? Start local, think broader, match buyers, not just borders. This reminds us to begin our search within the neighborhood, but expand to the broader market area when necessary. And the focus should always be on matching the subject property with comparable sales that align with what the typical buyer would consider, rather than being confined by geographical boundaries. So this takes us to our next poll question coming up on our last topic. But Steve, I'll take a bit of a break here to see whether or not we have anything else you want to. I see there's a hand up. So Diana, if you have a question, please type it into the chat so that we can address it that way.
While everyone's filling in their answers, Bill, I'll tell you, there's not a lot of questions coming in, but there's certainly a lot of discussion. And the overarching theme again continues to be the appraisers, I think, feeling a sense of frustration and feeling that the GSEs are assuming the worst about them. And I'll of course let you weigh in too, but what I would say to the appraisers is a couple of things. One is, let's remember that I think we all agree that nobody wants bias, whether intentional or unintentional, or in any kind of appraisal report. right? I think every appraiser on this chat would agree, every lender would agree, everyone here from NAN would agree. Um, the what we don't want to have happen is the appraisers think the GSEs are assuming the worst, so then the appraisers begin assuming the worst about the GSEs, that they're just out to get me and they're making unreasonable demands. Instead, how do we foster more conversation and productive working together in a way to help ensure that there is no unintentional bias. There is no room for even one family to be adversely affected. So while I certainly understand the appraisers feeling that taking it personally, how about we reframe that, for the chat here, guys? And what are your thoughts on how the appraisers can best contribute to the solution? Not saying the appraisers are the problem, but the appraisers are the best ones to position us to help us solve the problem. So we'd love to open it up for some conversation there in chat. And Bill, if you have anything else that you'd like to add, by all means, go ahead.
No, I mean, look, I mean, these are great questions, and you make some great points there, Steve. I'm going to try and move through the rest of these slides to make sure we meet our time limit, and then we can definitely stay a little longer to go over additional questions or even comment, just basic discussion, right? But right here, this poll question: what method do you use to support your market change / time adjustment? I've been calling them market change adjustments for a really long time. It seems like that maybe that's the direction. Most people call them time adjustments, but I do think that there's a shift or a change, probably because some of the things that have occurred here that people are referring to them as market change adjustments. But how do you support them? Are you using a housing price index, an HPI, statistical analysis or modeling, or using good old fashioned paired sales? I don't make time adjustments. Look, I've been around long enough, 35 years. I remember in the very beginning, if you made any type of time adjustment, whether positive or negative, you had to brace yourself for some blowback, right? In other words, it's like, hey, what are you doing? I was on a webinar the other day with Lyle Radke, and he said that they really didn't pay much attention to them back in the day either. So, maybe that was, I'm talking about way back in the day, because they didn't really have a way to substantiate or confirm it anyway, right? So they didn't really look at it all that closely. Anyway, interested in to see what you have to say there. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have recently introduced updates to the market analysis requirements in appraisal reports. These updates are designed to promote consistency and transparency in how appraisers analyze and report on market trends. So first off, one of the things that you need to do is that you have to have a minimum of 12 months of market data for your trend analysis. That's on page 1, right? Stable, increasing, declining. They want you to include 12 months of data to make that trend. How you check that box. This establishes a consistent time frame for identifying and analyzing the trends. And again, if it's up, it's going to be increasing, and if it's down, it's going to be decreasing. It's linear in your mindset when you're looking at that. Second, you need to provide your data source for those 12 months as well. Getting a little ahead of myself, but just go ahead and throw that in there. You're going to have to include a data source for that 12-month trend. Second, there's a clear differentiation between market trends and individual comparable adjustments. And remember, overall trends in the market, what we're checking on page 1, might not directly match specific adjustments for individual comparable sales. My initial reaction when I saw this, I'm like, wow, this is going to take a lot of education on everybody's part. I certainly have seen, and it's totally reasonable If you indicate on page 1 the property values are increasing, you really should have positive time adjustments. You definitely wouldn't have a negative time adjustment. But that's not what they're saying here. They're saying that the adjustments that can be made to the comparables for market change or time could be totally different than what you're reporting on page 1 of that linear 12-month trend. Okay, that's because trends don't go in a linear fashion. They're up and down. So when you're measuring from the contract date, we're going to go over that in a little bit, the contract date to the effective date, it could be up, down, or it could be stable, right? So those can be different. Third, appraisers must include support for their methodology showing exactly how trends and time adjustments for market conditions are calculated. These updates become effective on March 1st, 2025, but immediate adoption is encouraged to align with these new expectations. I am very confident that the message from CU that we're going to look at here later is already being utilized by collateral underwriter. But again, we'll look at that here in a second. So section B41-1.1-04 of the selling guide highlights a list of unacceptable appraisal practices. If you haven't read it, read that. There's a whole list in there. I think it's important for us to familiarize ourselves with that every once in a while. And one key item in this list is the failure to make market-derived adjustments, including time adjustments, when they are clearly indicated. This emphasizes the importance of analyzing market trends and applying time adjustments when necessary to ensure the appraisal reflects current market conditions accurately. So ignoring clear market indications not only violates Fannie Mae's guides, but also risks in producing unreliable and non-compliant appraisal reports.
Bill, a couple of timely questions here on that slide. One is, can you better define what would constitute clearly indicated? And another is, would a narrative suffice, or do they need to see the math for those adjustments?
Yeah. So, there was a lot of confusion. And again, we're going to get to the announcement here in a second and look at the message. I didn't even include in this deck the illustration that Fannie Mae included with the announcement because they used the word illustration in providing support. Everybody saw the graph that Fannie Mae included and Freddie Mac as well, and automatically assumed, okay, well, you got to have something like that in a report. They quickly, provided a follow-up saying, no, that's not required. But you do need to be providing support for it, and it should be sufficient that the person reading it understands it and can reproduce it. So we'll get into that again. Great question. But I want to go over, let's look at the top defects identified by Fannie Mae. I believe this was in 2023. Two of the top three are inadequate comparable adjustments and failure to address comparables. So these issues occur when adjustments are either missing or insufficiently supported. These consequences can be serious, and failure to adjust or make appropriate adjustments may lead to your report being referred to a state regulatory authority. And I say that because in the deck that I saw, Fannie Mae in 2023 reported 2,000 appraisers to state regulatory agencies for these two reasons: inadequate comparable adjustments and failure to adjust comparables. We definitely want to make sure we're providing support for adjustments, and we're going to talk about $0 adjustments here. You can't just put zero because you don't have one, because zero is an adjustment. So here is the message in collateral underwriter. Again, this is the message that if NAN is submitting a report to UCDP on the lender's behalf, we would see this message in the SSR. Now, the message that the lender gets is a lot more specific, clear to where it's also including the details of the direction and possibly even the amount. Fannie Mae has introduced this new message to address inadequate or unsupported time adjustments. So if appraisers don't comply with this requirement, we can anticipate possibly an increase in state reporting for inadequate adjustments as a direct result of this message. In other words, that was before they had this message specifically identifying that an adjustment should be made, and now they're definitely going to be alerted. Fannie Mae will even tell you, just because it fires doesn't mean it's wrong, right? You could be totally 100% correct. You need to provide the support for that, right? So, and all of those things are studied and vetted before you would ever get a letter from Fannie Mae, or they would report it to a state agency. That's what they say. So it's important to note that the HPI that they reference here, used by Fannie Mae, it's proprietary. So that's, everybody's like, oh, well, just give me the HPI. I'll use the same HPI, and then we'll make sure that we're all on the same page. Well, it's proprietary, and we don't get it. Now, according to Lyle Radke on a webinar that I saw him from Lyle Radke from Fannie Mae, he has said that, most published HPIs show similar patterns and results. Clear to the fact that, it really shouldn't be significant enough that it would be an issue or a problem. As a matter of fact, he says, we just want him to use an HPI. And whether it's right or wrong, obviously he assumes that there has a strong indication that they will be correct. But this reminds me. It actually was a friend of mine that said, if you ever watch Seinfeld, and there's the one episode where Kramer was getting phone calls from the local movie theater, and he would say, for this movie, press 1. For this movie, press 2. For this movie, press 3. Obviously, he can't interpret from the tones which one's being pressed, till where he finally says, why don't you just tell me which movie you want to see? I think that a lot of us as appraisers were kind of in the same boat. We're like, well, why don't you just tell me which the HPI and give us the data so we can duplicate the results? But that's certainly not happening, or isn't anything that's occurring here anytime soon. So let's review.
Question here, just a real quick one. What is the difference between the home price index and the MC report? Is there another HPI that's not Fannie's that we could refer to?
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I'm not here to say which one I think you should use or shouldn't use. It's quite possible there could be some that actually do better in your market than others. So it really should be something that you study and figure out, right? So I'm not going to endorse one or the other, and I'm not going to endorse a method or tell you specifically how to make these adjustments. I think that we do have a little bit of time here over the next few weeks to come up with something, and again, we'll talk about that here in just a few minutes. But let's review the required reporting for these market trends and time adjustments. Appraisers need to report and support a minimum of 12-month period market trends. This ensures consistency in analyzing changes over time. Second, appraisers must reflect changes in market conditions between the contract date. It's really important. If it's not available to you, then you can use the sales date, but I think most of us have those contract dates of a competitive sale and the effective date of the appraisal. This ensures the adjustments are current and accurate. Why the contract date? That's the meeting of the minds, right? That's when everybody decided on the price. So, that's why it's important. Things could happen between those meeting of the minds and even before closing that can significantly impact, and it could be hurricanes, it could be fires, it could be a closing of a large employer. So yeah, it's we need to make the adjustment based on the contract date. Finally, every comparable must include a time or market change adjustment. If no adjustment is necessary, please include a zero adjustment, right? Because a $0 adjustment has to be supported just as much as a negative or a positive adjustment. Just because it's zero doesn't mean that it doesn't count. It does count. And if you're going to say that there's been no change, you need to be able to support that that conclusion. So let's talk about the appraiser's responsibility when it comes to time adjustments. Crucial to summarize the method used to support your time adjustment and ensure that the explanation is clear and understandable, and again, that it can be repeated by the reader of the report. And again, Fannie Mae identifies several in their announcement for calculating this HPI, statistical analysis, where you can identify trends within specific data sets, paired sales, and then modeling using data-driven models to qualify your adjustments. The webinar that I was on was by George Dell. They actually, after they had Lyle on, they went on for the next 2 hours going over several different ways for you to support these adjustments. Some of them are what George has been doing in his educational classes for a long time. There were other alternatives there as well, right? One of them, they were using artificial intelligence. They were the data sets that they were gathering and using the artificial intelligence to do the calculations and provide the commentary support for making the adjustments. I know Jim Amarin also, he's a big artificial intelligence guy, really has been looking into that for a long time. And I've not looked at his specific process for doing this, but I know he has one. I also have a lot of respect for Jim. I'm sure that if he's, telling appraisers this is how it can be done, it certainly is well worth, checking that out. So just again, a word on $0 adjustments. Still an adjustment, and it's a conscious decision not to make an adjustment or a change. Just like other adjustments, it must be justified with data and clearly explained in the report. This ensures transparency, showing that the market data was analyzed and that your decision is that there is no market change. Again, if you don't put anything, the person reading it is like, what does it mean there's no market change, or does this mean that they forgot to make the adjustment, right? Which is why you get a revision request. So just put the zero in there. They know that you did the work, and that is your conclusion. And then with your commentary and the way you chose to support it needs to be included in the report. Got 1 minute here and I only got a couple slides. So let's go over NAN's QC enhancements to align with the updated Fannie Mae selling guide. Very soon we'll be adding the following QC to our process, and that's data source identification. We're going to be verifying that the appraiser has clearly specified the data source used to report the property value trend. And we're also going to be looking that commentary says that it's based on a minimum of 12 months of data, meaning consistency and transparency standards set by Fannie Mae. Again, if all you're doing is checking a box without the commentary, we don't know what data source you used, and we don't know that it's actually reflective of 12 months of data, 12 months or more data, right? So that's why we'll be looking for commentary in that QC. Continue with NAN QC enhancements. We're going to be looking for mandatory time and market change adjustments where every comparable sale has an adjustment. And that includes the $0 adjustment, right? So you're going to have something positive, something negative, or zero. If you don't have anything in there, we're going to be sending it back and asking that every comparable have an adjustment for change or market change or time. And then we're looking for the support, right? We're going to look to ensure that the appraisal report provides documented support for all time and market condition adjustments, including that $0 adjustment. I should be able to read it, should be able to understand it, and I should be able to reproduce it with the data that's in your report. If you can do all of those, then you know that it's sufficient information. So here's our mantra for this. You need to track the trends, support the adjustments, and report the rationale, right? So tracking your trends is just, identify the changes that occur over time. You need to support the adjustments that are made with clear documented data. And then, you need to include the reasoning behind your decision so that it's transparent and easy to understand. That said, we get to the end here. Sorry, I'm 2 minutes over, although I think we maybe started 2 minutes late.
Thank you, Bill. Really, really helpful information. And I know, there's some mixed opinions about the updated guidelines, but I think we can all agree that understanding the guidelines is very important, and you did an excellent job outlining that here. A couple of questions that I want to share with you that came in because they seem to be on the same theme, which is how does this market adjustments apply in rural markets? There's not an abundance of data. Like this one appraiser, Mike, said he was in a county that had 16 sales in the past 12 months, and they went from 125,000 to 2 million. And we had questions about how do you adjust sales with contract dates less than 3 months, since the median price over this period is the price in which changes are compared and adjusted. So can we dig in just a little bit more on some of those specifics for how to make those adjustments?
Yeah, and some of the methods may be better than others, in certain situations. So I'm not saying that, it's a one method in every situation. There could be times when paired sales might be the best thing you have, where particularly if there's not as much data, you may be able to do it with the properties that are included within the report itself. But, I think the important thing is that you do your very best, in explaining that and the limitations that you may be under. Those are great questions, and I agree. There's certainly areas where it's going to be a lot more difficult, right, to support. I was looking at a property today. Was in Florida area. The question was whether or not the adjustment, there was a negative time adjustment made. And the question was, okay, is the property values really declining, or is the appraiser looking at the change in the average and median sales price in the area, which also include a bunch of properties that were distressed sales, right? That maybe is not the best reflection of market change occurring, right? Because you have a lot of properties that are distressed from a condition standpoint that are selling, that are bringing down those numbers, right? So really, it needs to be reflective of just the properties that are true, competitors. So in this case, it was new construction. So there certainly wasn't any damage to the subject property because it hadn't been constructed yet, right? But so anyway, I don't think there's a cut and paste for that situation. But the report that I read did not have sufficient information. I had no idea whether what was included in the analysis, what or anything like that. So it definitely wasn't sufficient. It needed more information for anybody reading it to understand what was being done. Someone mentioned you mentioned the 1004 MC earlier. Remember, the agencies have already retired the 1004 MC. They do not require it. FHA HUD doesn't require it either, right? So nobody requires that form anymore. I took a lot of when it first came out, I didn't really like it. I kind of expressed my opinion against it, and people told me that I need to be quiet. But ultimately, everybody came around and realized, yeah, it's not that great of a form. So it's not required by the agencies anymore. But there are still a lot of clients that want it. Why do they want it? Because I think sometimes we don't provide enough information about market trends and support for adjustments within our appraisal that it's better than nothing, right? And so they're asking for it to be included. We do this correctly. I think most clients are going to say adios to the 1004 MC because the adjustments that you make on your report, or should not be reflective of the 1004 MC. It should be reflective of the type of analysis that we've gone over here.
Thank you, Bill. Very comprehensive answer. And I know we ran a few minutes over, guys, but I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think this spurred some great discussion. And while some of the questions were tough questions, I'm glad you asked them. And I know Bill is too, because this opening up those lines of dialogue is so important for us. And I think it's one thing that we're all missing in this arena is lenders, appraisers, AMCs, GSEs. If we don't communicate with one another, we're never going to get anywhere positive, right? It's always going to be this back and forth. So having this open discussion, we appreciate it. We want to do more of these webinars. We want to hear your feedback. Keep it coming even afterwards if you have other questions. And we're going to keep these webinars coming and do our part to try to keep the discussion going. So thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next NAN webinar.
All right. Thanks, everybody.